Honkai Star Rail is what people call a gacha game, a type of game many say you should avoid playing. It's grindy as hell, it's very hungry for your money, and it's well, gacha. But who cares about that? We're here for the anime PNGs. Star Rail is the latest Hoyoverse game featuring a vibrant collection of husbandos and waifus, catering to your average weeaboo's desire. The game is the company's first attempt at a turn-based game, but by no means is it their first when it comes to gacha. The game has been out for roughly a week or two, and after playing it, you may have noticed a couple of systems that seem to be taken straight from their previous titles. And while you may have strong opinions on many of these systems, today I'm going to tell you about the many improvements in their implementations, or downgrades in some cases, as a player of the Honkai title.
Beep, beep. Your mom's an antiquity.
By using a wise observation, you may have realized that Star Rail lies within the Honkai franchise. But if this is your first time ever hearing about this, then allow me to give you a quick heads up. So basically, games like Genshin, Honkai Impact, and Gun Girl Z are set in this Honkaiverse as people call it. The devs built these games on the concept of the imaginary tree that hosted these parallel worlds. Each game's respective story is normally self-contained and independent of one another. You aren't supposed to be able to travel between these worlds except in very few circumstances where it can be used as an excuse to say, putting characters from another game in another one. And the only one confirmed to be the case right now is the one and only Wild Yang from Honkai Impact. Though there are still other familiar faces which are just alternate versions of themselves. In Star Rail, we play as the Trailblazer, or as I like to call the raccoon human child, on a quest to chase down their mom across the galaxy to ask her why she brought them into this world after stuffing them with a nuclear bomb that operates suspiciously similar to how Honkai did, the Stellaron. It's very important, especially for a gacha, to have a memorable story or at least a strong intro, because a strong impression keeps the player retention. I'm going to show you how the company's approach have evolved by looking at their previous games starting from Honkai Impact. While it's unavoidable to not put Genshin up against Honkai at every turn, straight up comparing each game's story usually doesn't work for a few reasons. Each game focuses on a completely different aspects of storytelling. Honkai hinges on the changing interpersonal relationship between its characters, while Genshin went for a broader spectator feel, where the emphasis was put on learning about the inhabitants that make up the world, while the player inevitably gets dragged into its problems. So instead of doing that, I'm going to focus on how these games use its story to get you interested in your early days. For how many people that praise its story for being something exceptional, some may say the game suffered from a weak intro or outright bad, depending on who you ask. It mainly stems from the game having supplementary mangas for you to read before you play the game, which few new players would know existed, or even if they knew, they wouldn't have a clue how far they're supposed to read into anyways. But that's not the root of the problem. The game seemed to expect you to already finish some mangas, as it would leave out those crucial information found outside the game and just starts building off it. For example, when the lead character gets kidnapped in front of her aunt, we see her instantly rebel, getting help from a rival group to her organization, seemingly already on the same page. This would have felt like it came out of nowhere. Why is our so-called good guys, or girls, colluding with the group that to our knowledge at this point was basically a separatist terrorist? I hope you get the picture. This together presents an extra layer of commitment for new players to go through. Sure, it gets better after a while, but speaking from experience, unless they were already highly motivated, that's just not how you get new players interested in trying the game. Go forward a few years, Genshin Impact was taking the internet by storm. This time around we had a manga to build hype 2 years in advance, which is similar to what they did with Honkai. The difference this time around was that the manga was truly a side story, not necessary to the main character's perspective. You could never have read it and would lose next to nothing going to Genshin, probably why they never bothered to finish it. By most accounts, the game's launch was a huge success and was probably what propelled Den MiHoYo onto the radar of many people, including myself. In Honkai Star Rail, there was an attempt at bridging the gap between each of the game's player base, taking some of the things Honkai player liked and some that Genshin player loved, and hopefully finding a sweet spot between them. Speaking as a Honkai player, when I think about Honkai, it's mostly the character developments, the vocal tracks that comes with it, the emotional highs, and the relationship. But when I look at Genshin, the game doesn't focus on a main cast. We go and learn about a group of characters, learn about their nation, the story happens, and then we move on to the next one. It's a harder time getting attached to the characters when they constantly change as you progress. They get developments in the main story at most up until their story quest. But once you move past that point, the best we get is a reminder in an event that they exist. It's not that the devs don't know how to get you attached to a character, it's just that Honkai happened to have fit my build. But what Honkai doesn't have is a strong sense of location. You can probably write a thesis paper on how the game world works, but you won't be able to say much when it comes to a given location in-game. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to have a game that is the best of both worlds? We have the usual self-insert protagonist type, usually silent with a few prompts in their dialogues. Playing as them, you can vandalize public property, assault the hotel staff, and flirt with all the cute women. We go on expeditions on different planets and locations and see an ever-changing collections of characters. But this time we travel with a main cast that takes turns joining the fun on a given expedition, and it's very likely that we are headed for a big event for one of the main cast. We've seen what the game has to offer. I personally liked it, the boss fight is awesome, and I expect no less.
A jade abacus is just a jade abacus.
When it comes to content in a gacha game, there's a price to be paid for the free monetization model, artificially gated progression, usually done with an energy system, and grinding. Lots of grinding. Most of the system in Star Rail is really just Genshin, with a few smidge of Honkai here and there. You have boss farming, character ascension materials, XP books, and of course, relics. What, you thought you could escape the artifact grind? The game has many more ways to take up your time. Challenge stages, basically Spiral Abyss, roguelike raids, sponsored by Honkai's Elysian Realm. There were plenty quality of life changes that made the overall experience more tolerable, even if it's a massive slog sometimes. Dailies, it can be done in an extremely short time. You'd actually get half of it done just by you spending your energy, so long gone are the days of daily quests. One thing to note about Star Rail is how they set up their characters using the paths. It determines what weapons, or in this case, light cones, you are able to put on them. The subscribe for more light cone isn't just effective at supporting my channel, but it's also applicable to any hunt characters, whose whole point was to murder people. It's a very minor thing and not very meta, but it feels great when you're not limited to only using light cones from your character's path, even if it's at the cost of only getting the raw stats. Because at least this way, if you lack a light cone to put on your units, you can at least use the raw stats from the good ones to make a makeshift gear. It prevents situations where the rare gear you got from pooling becomes utterly useless because of your roster that didn't have anyone who's capable of using it. Just be aware that the grind really gets steep as you reach mid-game, because unlike in a live action game where you can just still beat your enemies with your immense skill regardless of your team's strength, by nature of a turn-based game you will have no choice but to take the hit and survive, let alone do actual damage. So upgrading your stats will always be your biggest priority, and in Star Rail there's many damage types which require investments in multiple characters that deal each damage type. So my advice to the people trying Star Rail or any gacha game really, always remember to play at your own pace. Don't burn yourself out. The game will hit you with the daily grind FOMO and artificially keep you from progressing too fast. It will tempt you to spend your money to skip these steps, so don't. It's not worth it. You already have the free point. The game doesn't require money to be played, but what it requires is your precious time. And if you're willing to spend it, you may be able to enjoy the other things the game offers, the artistic value, whether it's the graphics, the story, the lore, the music, or the characters. Star Rail seems like an attempt to bridge the gap between the player base of the company's two biggest products. And for better or for worse, I believe it was able to combine the good things from each of them and still keep the characteristics of its predecessor. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think about Star Rail down below.